Welcome back, everyone. Um, Happy Friday. And today, our only agenda item is doing like kind of a brainstorming or pitch session for story ideas for your next round of stories. So, yeah, we can. I don't have a particular structure in mind other than just whoever has ideas, you can talk, and then we'll keep doing that until we run out of time or yeah. Does anyone have an idea you wanna pitch to the class or share, or thoughts on where you might
Yeah,
want
I
to go?
had an idea. Um, so I was thinking, and I'm doing this with Amelia. We had discussed a little bit outside of class, but
Okay.
we're doing this, or we were thinking of doing a story on like how the vegetarian and vegan businesses and restaurants, like how that trend has evolved over the last couple of years, especially like in the past year. I think there's been a lot of growth within like plant-based um, foods in in grocery stores and like um, stuff like that. So we're thinking of looking at like those like consumer trends and also like maybe vegan and vegetarian restaurant per capita data within cities and like Yelp reviews, maybe. And there's one more thing.
Like hashtags on social,
Yeah,
like
like
vegan,
Google search trends too.
um, or like the rise of like plant milks. Like I don't know.
Mm.
I feel like I see like TikToks that's like personalities of like the different milks, or like making jokes about people who drink like cow milk. And I think they're so funny. Like the oat milk like story just like makes me actually die of laughter. Um, and I worked at Starbucks for like last year, and we didn't have oat milk in my store, but like I guess Dunkin' had started to have oat milk in other places, and customers would be like angry that we didn't have oat milk. Like I would like ruin people's days by saying, "Sorry, we don't have oat milk." So that's a possibility.
I mean, it is the best of the milks, so yeah.
It is the best. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. But it'd be good to verify with data. Um, yeah. No, yeah, that sounds cool. Um, yeah, I could see. Yeah, so there's like just the milk side of it. That's kind of a vegan, potentially vegan related thing. Um, Although lots of non-vegetarian, non-vegans still like oat milk, um, for example. But you could also look at like stigma or like social capital, either cost or gain from being or not being vegetarian or vegan. Um, uh, yeah, and yeah, that sounds cool. Or yeah, also availability. I like that. That seems like a data driven. Maybe there's some data on that. And then you could look at like yeah, so that could be framed as what are people buying, and then also how hard is it to get like your meal ingredients together. Um, and then also there's like a nutrition angle, like um, you know, diet wise, what are the health costs and benefits and all that. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of that sounds neat.
We saw like a data set. I think it was like something to do with Google searches, and it was interesting because it like by region, um how like it's more popular. There's like more like searches for vegan, or like veganism is more popular. It was like West Coast, and in the Midwest, or like whatever, like North Dakota, for instance, it was like nothing. It was kind of funny. There was like nothing in the middle, but like East Coast, West Coast, where like it was more popular.
Yeah, so that like spatial distributions could imply like a social factor. So like you know, you want to be like your friends and neighbors and family, and then also, but also could also relate to resources. The other factor that I meant to mention just now, but forgot in my last statement was there's like the nutrition side, and then there's also the environmental impact. So like, what's the cost of the meat industry on? I mean, there's like the ethics of killing animals for food. Do we need to do that? And then the environmental impact. So anything from like purely like carbon emission standpoint to like the facilities used to house and slaughter animals, like take resources. So is that the optimal use of our earth limited resources? And then another trend that I'm also like, so there's like there have been various movements over the years to like eat more bugs, like insects, and which is it's obviously like that's not vegetarian, but like maybe it could be lumped in with like alternatives to like traditional in the US, or like most common in the US, like forms of consumption of food. And then Hannah also said impact on rural economies with decreased demand for dairy farmers. That's also a good point. Yeah. So like,
actually, sorry. But just on that, I took a class a couple of years ago where we like interviewed local dairy farmers, and like tons of them were like changing to different products because they couldn't, like, there wasn't really that much of demand for dairy as much as it had been. So yeah, like in the area too.
Yeah, like the dairy farms are huge in Vermont, so especially so. Yeah, that's huge. And then I feel like, I don't know if this is an accurate assessment, but like I feel like CSAs, like farm shares, and I don't know if I guess like farmers markets, like there was the Dartmouth farmers, the farmers market on the Dartmouth Green. I don't know if you're at the right age to participate in farmers markets or if you like that stuff, but that's like a big thing for the older folks to do maybe. But I feel like I've been like hearing a lot more about like CSAs and like with local farms who are like, particularly during this pandemic, I've gotten like tons of newsletters like, okay, we're struggling because our traditional sources of business and revenue are disrupted by the pandemic. So CSAs allow you to like a lot, like buying into a CSA allows us to be supported and have like a more stable source of income. And then here are the benefits to you. Like you get more vegetables and cheaper food and stuff like that. But it's like an interesting balance against like kind of big grocery stores and non-local food distribution mechanisms, which are also growing. Like there's like big supermarket chains, and then even like chains that were founded on like sustainable principles, like Whole Foods, for example. Now Whole Foods is owned by Amazon, which is very much not a sustainable or sustainability focused organization. So yeah, it's interesting I don't know, that seems like a, I mean, another thread to this. There's a lot of threads to go in. Cool.
Yeah, how do you like propose finding some of that data? Because definitely it's like some of the more like nuanced data is like really interesting, but like really, really hard to find.
Huh. I mean, I think the way I would probably frame, like, go about that search would be like, if you drill down to like a subset of the questions that you might want to focus on, at least to start out on, let's say you want to focus on like, carbon emissions of meat production, or like, vegetarian versus carnivorous lifestyles or omnivorous lifestyles. Maybe someone's released a data set on like the amount of carbon that's emitted to like feed and raise cattle or something like that. And then you could look at like a consumption data set, like how many tons of various types of meat are consumed in like, if you want to focus on the US, then, in the US, I'm guessing there are probably like by country data sets, and it probably varies substantially by country. My guess is also the US is probably, whatever the US practices are, probably terrible for the world and for the environment. So that might be a good one to focus on. And then like in terms of availability, you mentioned like availability in grocery stores. I don't know that you're going to be able to find like grocery store orders, but
there is a data set on I think it's Kaggle or whatever, that's actually like grocery store purchases per customer.
Oh, well, okay, perfect. Cool. Oh, and I'm just seeing Instacart has a data set apparently, so that
that's the one I meant.
Okay.
So I guess it's just people who order Instacart, but it still shows some like trends and purchases.
Cool. And that like makes me think of maybe there are other, so like kind of tech company, like app developers, that sort of kind of segment of organizations often have like public data sets, because they are using, they want to figure out like, how do we mine data better and more efficiently. So like Uber probably has Uber has a lot of data sets they've released, but like you could maybe look at which restaurants do people go to, or like with Open Table, like which restaurants are people going, like making reservations at, or Instacart, where are people ordering food? What are they ordering? Or like maybe there's an Uber Eats data set, like what foods are people ordering? Or any of these apps that allow you, like that involve food. Maybe more than Instacart has interesting data. Let's see. I'm seeing also there's like, it says Tesco grocery. Let's see, I can paste this in. A large scale data set of grocery purchases in London. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Cool. Yeah. So maybe, one approach would be like, do some digging. And so it seems like there are lots of potential directions to go in, but maybe if you do some digging about like specific data sets that are available, you could kind of use those to refine your question space a little bit. And then, you know, that's probably the easiest way to do it, rather than kind of coming up with your story fully ahead of time. Cool. Okay. Did you have any other discussion, either Isha or Amelia? Do either of you want to mention anything else, or pitch anything else, or discuss anything else, or does anyone else have any comments on vegetarianism and veganism? Okay. Cool. Sounds neat. Who else would like to talk about their idea or their story?
I can talk about an idea that Nathan and Amelia and I were thinking about yesterday. It sounds kind of silly, but like, bear with us. I think it would be a lot of fun and really interesting. We wanted to look at The Bachelor and see like the success rates of relationships on the show and like what kind of predicts them, because I think it's pretty interesting. And we have like a lot of different ways that we could like take the story in terms of like first impression roses. Does that actually mean anything? Like, are you actually more likely to make it? And then like we could turn it into some sort of commercial for like a competing reality show if the success rates are very low, which they are. There are like a lot of different interesting ways that we can take it, and there's a lot of data out there available to us. I don't know if Amelia or Nathan want to hop in on that.
Yeah, like we could look at like other like dating shows and compare like Bachelor, if there's like a higher success rate, to like Love Island or something like that, and yeah, turn it into a promo for like finding your like the love of your life. I don't know, it's kind of silly, but sometimes you have to have a silly story. And
yeah, I think we're like all like also like pretty interested in like reality TV shows, so it would be very fun to work on. And we would like go, I think, through like the different episodes and like see, we might like look at a specific like variable, like like what Hannah was saying about like the first like rows, and then seeing like whether like going to their Instagram pages and like trying to figure out if they're still together or not. And could make like some interesting arguments there.
I found like 4 GitHub pages filled with like
Oh wow.
all sorts of data on The Bachelor. It's kind of crazy.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, well, I'll have to be educated on like I've heard of The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, but oh, there's a 538 data set too. That's cool. Yeah, it does look like there's a lot of data. That sounds interesting. So then, so like, then your question would be kind of data set driven, because you want to focus on data from this show, and then so if there's just to have a sense of the show, is it like there's for each show or each episode, is there like one person, or can you maybe unpack what's the scope of the data set?
Okay.
I guess is what I'm trying to, how does it work?
There are, one sec, I have like the beginnings of a spreadsheet. There are 25 seasons, and each season there's at least 25 contestants, which are girls in The Bachelor, and 1 bachelor. And then he gives the rose, which is like you get to stay if you get a rose. There's a first impression rose, which was started in season 5, that he gives to like after first meeting the girls. And there's like this whole thing around it, like the girls who get the first impression rose, do they actually make it to the finale, or is that just like a thing? Anyways, and then they go through like these weeks of dating, and every week like 4 or 5 girls get eliminated until it's the finale, and then he proposes at the finale.
And so some people get one-on-ones. There's like group dates and one-on-ones. We can also look at if like one-on-ones our predictors? Because like Rachel had a lot of one-on-ones. I feel like she had one-on-one almost every week. And then Abigail, who got the first impression rose, literally never ended up getting a one-on-one. I felt so bad.
So the first impression rose removes you from the competition, like you just
For that
automatically
week.
make it
For that
through?
week.
Oh, for that week.
Yes.
Oh.
So you have like an automatic like bye basically to the next round.
Interesting.
But yeah, I think that what Amelia was saying, like just seeing like how many one-on-ones they get would be like a very strong indicator of like who makes it to maybe like the final round. Maybe not necessarily who like wins, but like who makes it, you know?
Yeah, and then I wonder if there's a correlation there too with like people who are still together, because I also feel like JoJo and Jordan, like I just love their story. Like I could watch their season forever, and they had like really good one-on-ones. Like because they actually, it's like they actually got to know each other. Sorry, I had a little too much time on my hands in quarantine.
So yeah, so it sounds interesting. So I guess like the like thoughts that are coming to mind are like it's some of the rules of the setup, you'll want to like encode those into the analysis. So like let's see. Yeah, so like so can you get more than one first impression rose? Like could it be like the number of roses you get, or each contestant gets one?
Well, the number of roses you get, like whoever gets the most rose ends up winning. So like you have to get a rose to make it to the next round.
Oh, wait, multiple people can get a rose?
No, okay, wait, sorry.
No,
That's
no,
kind of
okay.
that's kind of
I
confusing.
thought,
We're saying this in a
Okay.
confusing way. So
Yeah.
okay.
that's like how he eliminates people, is the rose ceremony at the end where he gives out roses. And along the episode, he can give out roses early to like other people.
Okay.
So in the first episode of
Got
every
it.
season, he gives out a first impression rose that like makes someone safe for that round.
Because they automatically get a rose because they've already gotten one. I see.
You
Okay.
need a rose to survive. At the rose ceremony, people who didn't get roses in like one-on-one dates or like the first impression rose, if you get
Got
a rose ceremony, then you also move on. But if you don't, then you're out.
Just as an aside, has anyone ever like lost their rose, and what if you like, does someone, I don't know, I guess it's probably well guarded or something. What if you like misplace it?
The rose is just symbolic. You're fine.
It's just a
They'll
squish.
It'd be
replace
funny
Okay.
though. If someone lost and they're
Okay.
like, you're out.
There have been people though that like got roses and turned them down.
Mm.
So
Huh.
that could be, I don't know. Also I sent a link to this TikTok account that just does like bachelor data stories, I guess. So maybe you want to look at that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. But I think they did like an
Yeah, huh.
analysis on like the first impression rose. So
But that's
there's
actually a
That's
sick account.
so cool.
yeah.
Cool.
Did you like know
The other
about that
thing
account?
that I
Or-
was thinking of, sorry, were you saying something?
Oh, no. I just said like, did you like know about that account, or you just like typed it up?
Yeah. I like popped up on my feed one time. And
Nice.
then I was just like, oh, maybe I'll find it. But the other thing is like, I was in this class where I did an analysis of like the Bachelor in Paradise relationships. Bachelor in Paradise is like, there's like an equal amount of guys and girls, and then they just have like a free for all basically, and like whoever like stays together gets to like wins basically. And I did like a graph, like social network analysis of it. So that could be, I don't know if that's like too far out of the scope of your thing, but like different like measures of the different people in the network. But yeah, just wanted to mention that maybe.
Yeah,
That
that's
could work
neat.
for
So
Love Island.
I like the idea of a social network analysis. Like, you could imagine drawing, you want to figure out, so each person is a node in your network, and then you want to draw connection strengths between the different nodes. And then how do you, like, you could use different methods for determining those strengths. So like,
Oh, I would be down.
Sorry, everyone gets
My, one of my classes I'm taking right now is network analysis. So that could work out.
The QSS class.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one I did the
Oh,
for. Yeah.
oh, nice. Did you have, sorry, Professor Siriani?
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
cool. Yeah, that's neat. That sounds good. Another potential direction. So you could like, I wonder if there are like dating app or dating website data sets. So you could compare like reality TV dating to like real world dating. That could be interesting.
Yeah, there's like a website, I think it's called Business Apps. And this would be like, I don't know, like if we didn't end up doing a commercial, it could end up being tied into this, or even, I don't know. But they have actually like a ton of data on like Tinder and Bumble and like online dating apps. And I didn't see success rate necessarily, or did I see success rate? But like user statistics, like age group and like number of users. And I don't know, like I guess like the overall theme could be like unconventional dating methods and if they're effective or whatever. Because I know that like it's kind of a generational thing where like our generation does that more, and like older generations are like, I can't believe people meet online, but like I don't know, there's definitely pros and cons. And like a pro is like you had to meet people that you otherwise might not never have met. But then also it's, I don't know, I feel like there's like a lot of like stigma around like, oh, you meet online, like that's not like you're not going to stay together. So I don't know, something that could be a different angle.
I mean, I wonder if that's changed during the pandemic too, when like it's like everything is both more closed and more open in a way. It's like, you know, people aren't interacting physically as much, but then the internet shrinks the world in a way. So yeah. Anyways, yeah, that's not like, you don't have to, it could just be a analysis of a TV show that could be interesting. That I think that could be an interesting story. And then if you wanted to tie it into real world things, then like I think that could also be a neat direction. Those could also be separate stories. They don't have to be the same. But like I was thinking some kind of comparison about like how are things portrayed in reality TV versus what is reality. And like, I mean, reality TV makes it seem like the word reality, or, you know, the phrase makes it seem like it's portraying reality, but maybe that's, I guess, you know, data could speak to whether that is or isn't actually the case. But yeah, yeah, that sounds neat also.
Yeah, I think that would be like a really interesting like hook line, and then you can like dive into like how it seems like the producers of the show like give more time to like certain people just based off of like how like what the viewers like, it seems like. So it's not just like a natural environment, like there's a lot of manipulation of it.
Yeah, that's interesting too. And then in the real world, you have like friends and family weighing in on your decisions. So I don't know, that might happen in reality TV too, but yeah, so there are lots of constraints that are outside of the specific relationship, but that might influence, and maybe those are different in different circumstances or scenarios. Maybe they've changed over time in interesting ways. Yeah, neat. I'm seeing, like, I'm just Googling like dating data sets, and it looks like, so Tinder has released a ton of data sets. Almost all are on like predicting swipes. So it's like images and you have to predict the swipe direction. But I don't know if it has anything on like, do relationships last? Or if that's even tracked. But it seems like that might be important, or maybe not. With the Bachelor data sets, do you have data on like how do you know which relationships last? Or is it a prediction, or?
It's like published kind of, like even if it's not published in the data set, you can go through and like it's,
Us Weekly has trackers on all this.
yeah.
Oh,
There's
okay.
like something called Bachelor Nation, believe it or not, like a whole community of people who are just like who live for this.
Wow.
Keeps everyone well informed.
That's you, Amelia, right?
I actually literally just started watching it in quarantine, so I act like I'm like an OG fan, but I never watched it before. But now I'm kind of obsessed with it, and even more so is my mom. Like my mom was the one who was like, "Did you hear that like Matt and Rachel are back together?" And I was like, "Never did I think that'd be coming from her." Because my mom is not like that. If anyone knows my mom, like you wouldn't think that, but we got hooked together.
That's funny.
Huh. Yeah, that sounds neat. And then, yeah, so that, yeah, and then like, I think with this story too, it'll be important to like, so it's kind of a neat data set. So that's a hook in and of itself. But then one thing I'm not currently getting a clear impression on is like, what direction is it? Like, what's the kind of key message or direction here? So like, is it like which relationships last on this one show? And then how can you, I don't know, maybe that's interesting by itself, or maybe questions could be raised about like, does this apply to reality? I don't know if that makes it more or less interesting, et cetera. Or like, maybe there's some unexpected finding, like these first impression roses, maybe there's a negative correlation. Like it'd be fun if there's like a negative correlation between like success in subsequent weeks and getting one of these roses. Like if it,
yeah. I can
if
see
it
that
like
happening.
removes you from activities or something because you're no longer in the competition, maybe you can't showcase some other strength, etc. So interesting.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
this would be like where we like kind of define the question more as we go. But the good thing is like there's so much data out there that we can kind of see what is interesting and kind of like create the story from there.
Yeah, like kind of like see, like there's probably like a few different things that we're interested in now, and like going through like the data and like seeing like what we find would like give us maybe a better idea of like the most interesting story to tell.
Yeah, that sounds great. And then if there are different variants of the show, like it sounded like there's maybe a standard variant, and then there's was it Love Island or Paradise Island? Maybe are those the same or different, or
Bachelor and Love Island is like one kind of like TV series, and then like Bachelor in Paradise like has like many seasons, I think, too.
Yeah, there's also
Okay.
the Bachelorette, which is like the Bachelor, but in reverse. So it's like all these men, and then it's like the Bachelorette, the woman decides. And I feel like I've seen something about that. There's differences, like usually when the Bachelorette, so it's like when it's the woman picking, those relationships have lasted longer than when it's the men picking from all these ladies.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, I was gonna say we
Get
should look
so
at
catty
that.
and go for each other. That could be another cool thing.
Yeah, like gender
We could
difference.
also look at like the ages of like Bachelor, Bachelorette, and if that has something like if you're more mature, if that predicts more like staying together longer or something.
Claire is definitely not more mature.
Although she and Dale are back together.
She's an outlier.
I think we're getting carried away.
Am I assuming correctly that these are all like hetero relationships? So there's no like, yeah, okay. Well, that's sad. Okay. Yeah, so it could be interesting to look at different variants, like scenarios people are placed in. I don't know. Maybe there are gender asymmetries in how the show plays out or how the show is set up. It'd be really interesting if the rules are different across the Bachelor and Bachelorette, because it's like if you're playing a different game, the outcomes are going to change, but that's because you're playing a different game, not because of the genders of your participants necessarily. So that could be interesting to explore too. Yeah.
The other thing that I just thought of is there's like some people within the franchise that are like in multiple seasons of multiple different shows within the Bachelor series. Like some people like are contestants and then become like the Bachelor or Bachelorette, and then they also like go on Bachelor in Paradise. So maybe there's something like the longer you stay within it, I don't know, different outcomes.
But
Maybe
then I
like
guess,
Jared and Ashley.
yeah.
I don't know.
Huh. Okay.
That could
Yeah.
have to do with like the manipulation too of like the producers. Like they probably see like what characters are like very likable or like attract a lot of attention, and then like they probably from that like choose like to invite them back.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the whole story with Abigail, right? Like like people thought that she was bullying people too, but then because she could be the next Bachelorette, they made her seem nice. I don't know.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't know about that. That's interesting.
Okay. Well, yeah, it sounds interesting. Cool. I guess another like something else to keep in mind is like if I have to understand more of the setup of the show than you've said, I probably would benefit from a little bit of background, or like, so maybe slipping in like a 1 or 2 sentence explanation of like, okay, here's the setup, here's what it means, here's what this rule is, here's what people are, some background like explanation. I think that would be helpful. And then, if you're referring to specific characters, I guess if it's important to know any background information, I know that would be helpful for me. Maybe all of you are already familiar with all the characters, so maybe it won't be helpful to having each other understand, but I think I'd recommend that just so I can follow. Cool. Okay. Any other comments or ideas on the Bachelor story idea? Okay, cool. Any other ideas?
Yeah, I have one. I found this data set for 2021. It's like the World Happiness Report. I think they do it every year, but it's like, you might know about it. I think it might be kind of famous, but it's like a couple of different research institutions like put together different indicators and stuff. And so they had a couple of, basically there's like on a scale of, I think like 0 to 10, like a score of happiness. And then they have a couple of other indicators in that data set, like social support and like life expectancy and stuff. And then I also found this other data set, the World Development Index, which has like more niche indicators like access to electricity and like percent of the population that's urban versus rural and stuff like that. And I already did some like data wrangling on it to see if it would work. And I think I'm going to try to basically see like what things are correlated with happiness, both like within that report and then outside of it. And some of the other indicators that I don't think would like be that meaningful, but could be funny to look at correlations are like fishery production. Like for some reason, that's like a big development indicators, like what amount of fishery production you have and like how many fisheries there are and stuff, which apparently like has some correlations with well-being in different places. So I don't know that I would actually use that, but it was kind of funny. And I thought I could kind of dive into some different indicators and see what is correlated with happiness.
I mean, that could be related to like access to a large body of water nearby or something, which I could see that being nice. And then, yeah, so I mean, maybe it's not, even if it seems kind of spurious on the face of it, maybe there's some interesting stuff there. Yeah, that sounds really cool. The World Happiness Report, some of my students in previous years have looked at, I guess, previous iterations of the happiness report. If you wanted, I think there's a story called Happiness Data. It's from a few years ago, but you know, you could check out what they've done if you wanted to build on what, you know, those projects, but you also don't have to build on those projects. So there might be something interesting there. And then I forget what you called it, but the drilling down with, you know, more detail data set, that sounds really interesting too. And then there's like, yeah, like I wonder if there are interest. So there's like what makes us happy. Like that's that sounds like a neat framing of the story. Then there are like various papers that have been published, I guess over the last decade on like, what income do you need to like be happy? Like, you know, money correlates with happiness, but only up to a point. So a few, like maybe 10 years ago or so, there was I think it was like showing happiness and income are correlated, but only up to like salaries of, I think it was like 70K or something. And then after that, it's like, you know, it doesn't, like the correlation is totally flat. So if you're making like 70K versus $1 million, you're not any more happy.
Yeah, I think I've heard about that on like the individual level. I'm also like kind of interested in it since these data sets are by country. It's like the whole like money doesn't buy happiness thing like doesn't really hold up, because the happiest countries are like wealthy European countries on this data set, and the unhappiest countries are like countries that are in like humanitarian crises and are poor and have conflict and things like that. So it's like with the individual level, it's like up to a certain point and then it like plateaus, but it seems like maybe like as a sort of average or a society, like maybe, I don't know if that plateau exists. I don't know if there's really a way to find that out, but like it certainly seems to be pretty clear, which is interesting.
Yeah, there could also be interesting surprises, like if you like that's reminding me of like you could fit like a regression model to predict like, you know, GDP from happiness, and then say like, okay, well, some countries maybe aren't fit well by that model. So if you're like, given your GDP, if your happiness is substantially above or below where that like line would, you know, the average for that GDP, maybe that indicates something interesting about your country. So like I'm thinking of like in your last data story, is it Kerala?
Kerala.
Kerala. I can never get the pronunciation. Okay, Kerala. It was like a relatively low income state, but then like people, it seemed like healthcare was very equitable, quality of life was really high. I don't know if you specifically looked at happiness there, but like presumably happiness might be high. So that could be a really interesting thing to look at too. Maybe it's like particularly efficient or inefficient economies or distributions of resources. you could look at like types of economies, like, you know, some countries have like more distributive focused, you know, economies like high taxes, distribute the wealth relatively equally, low gap between the highest and lowest earners. And then other countries are, you know, focus on like, you know, low taxes and high gaps, and does one versus the other make people happier, et cetera.
Yeah, the top happiest countries, like they're wealthy, but they're also like pretty high, like I think healthcare for all, like welfare state type of organization, like Finland and stuff, that have pretty, I think, distributive ways of doing things. Yeah, so I think that would be interesting too.
Yeah, I had
So
also,
wonder, oh, sorry.
I had also stumbled upon the happiness data set and was like really interested in it. And it would be interesting to see like within country versus as a whole, like, oh, I forget, is it like Sweden or something's the happiest country?
I think it's Finland. Yeah, but like
something like that, how they say money doesn't buy happiness, but like the happiest countries are like wealthier, but then like within that happiest country, if there's data for like who's happier and if it's like, if it matter, I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah. Yeah, no, that could be interesting.
in that country who's happier. I was also thinking about, and I don't know if there's data on this, but like, or we'd probably have to find it separately. But education systems and happiness, like I know that over in those like European countries, they have different, I think this might be Sweden, but like they don't have grades, or it's like they're not the same kind of thing. So stress isn't the same amount as school. And actually, like that's better. I don't know. I've seen a lot about that.
Yeah, I was trying to see, not within the like World Development Index data set, but there's a different one about education that I tried to see, and it was like really poorly formatted, so I didn't pursue it further, but I could pick it back up to try to see. But it was basically all these stats about like enrollment, like especially by gender. So that would be interesting to see like the equality of education, like how that impacts happiness, things like that.
Neat. Another thought that's coming to mind, there's a podcast called Invisibilia that I think is really interesting. So there's a lot of good stuff on it, but one of the early seasons, I'm trying to like, so there's one on emotions. I don't know if that's the right one. Let's see. It was something about how it was looking at like happiness in, there was some study of like happiness in, I think it was freed slaves or maybe it was before the Civil War. I don't know. Happiness of African Americans in like right around the time of the Civil War, and then like in the North and South. So like, you know, some of them were slaves, some were not, or had just been freed or something like that. And the prediction was the like Northern Blacks were like, the people running the study predicted Blacks in the North should be happier because they have like high, like all the quality of life indicators were higher, versus Black communities in the South, like either, I forget if they were like literally slaves or had just been freed, but it's like, you know, no resources. Surprisingly though, the study found that Southern Blacks were happier than Northern Blacks. And the reason that was put forth was not related to like absolute level of resources, but relative disparity between like you and your neighbors. And if you use disparity as a predictor, that explains happiness much better than like the absolute level of resources. So like if you have more stuff than your neighbor, then even if the amount of stuff you have is low overall, it makes you happier than, you know, than if, you know, there are huge disparities, but you have more overall. So I don't know, that I'll have to find that episode, but I'll post it on Slack if I can track it down. But it made me think of the like kind of spreading the wealth in countries that are kind of more of a socialist sort of mindset. Like, where does that happiness come from? Is it like everyone's quality of life improves because every like individual, the median individual maybe has more access to resources, or is it that the disparities are lower? Anyways, that could be potentially interesting too.
Yeah, that's interesting, sort of like the social comparison angle, I guess.
I think an
Yeah.
interesting thing to look at, I just like glance at the data set, would be like, what's like the best predictor for happiness in a given country? Like family versus GDP versus government trust. Like for a different country, what makes them happy, and see if like, I know that in like, I feel like in South American countries, like they're big on family, and like that might be the best predictor of happiness for them. Whereas like, I don't know in the US if it's like GDP, like we care more about money and that's what makes us happier. I don't know, but that could be something cool to look at.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, let's see. I think this is the podcast. I think it's called Frame of Reference. Let's see if it goes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, anyways, I thought that was. I think it's that episode, but yeah, kind of interesting, potentially. Or you could just not go in that direction too. That's totally fine. Neat. Okay. Any other comments, discussion, ideas, questions for the happiness project? All right. Cool. Well, yeah, these all sound like great ideas. Amelia, it sounds like you're maybe in 2 groups, so you might want to pick a group and then decide for this project. You can also, if another, these projects can be somewhat fluid. So like, if maybe one project is smaller scale, you do it, you focus on one project at a time, and then other people in the class, if you're interested in some project or you want to follow up on something, you can either just build on that project and make a new story, or like as someone presents a figure or analysis, if you're like, oh, I really want to learn how to do that, you can jump into each other's projects and join different teams. And it's probably best to focus. I've never had someone do like 2 stories simultaneously and finish simultaneously, but like, it could be interesting to, if everyone contributes to every story, or, that could be interesting too. So that's, follow your interests, and, the format is pretty flexible. And then, the other option is, if you don't contribute to a story, but you're like excited by the data set, your next story could be about like a follow-up to a previous story. And then you can follow up on each other's stories, but also stories from previous years. So last year's stories are on YouTube. And then prior years are all in the data stories folder. And unfortunately, the code for these stories does not survive in perpetuity, because some of the packages become out of date. So not everything will necessarily run, but last year's stories probably will mostly run. And then as you go further back in time, things will start to break. But if you find something interesting from last year, you can always follow up on that too, if that's of interest. Cool. Okay. Well, so next week, the way the class is going to work from here on is, we'll see if anyone wants to do more brainstorming on Monday, and then we'll, leave time for debugging. And then I'm guessing no one's going to have finished the story by Monday, but if so, then we'll discuss that too. And, that'll kind of be the format for moving forward in the class. All right. So that seems like a good time to end. So enjoy the beautiful weather, everyone, and have a great weekend. And I will see you all on Monday. Take care.